All right. Hello, Melrose families. We are so happy to have you here with us tonight. We are going to be talking about navigating challenging conversations with your child. This is for all families in the district. It's intended for K to 5. However, if you have a child that is younger or a child that is older, it is still going to be applicable to you. So this is fun for all ages tonight. Just a couple of reminders of things that we just want to kind of highlight to you before we get started is that the session is being recorded. So if something happens at home, you need to step away, you just can't watch the whole thing, the link will be sent out either by principals or by the district in general. The slides from tonight will also be sent out in a view only so that any links that are in the slideshow you will have access to. So you'll get the link to the video and the link to the slideshow sent to you. And then just another FYI is that we're not able to see you, so we can only see each other. So the best way to communicate with us tonight is via the chat, and you'll notice that all four of us that are here tonight, which we'll introduce ourselves in a moment, are already communicating via that chat. And so for tonight, we want to start with introductions to the team of people that you see here today. I'm Jessica Patty, and I am the SEL or Social Emotional Learning Instructional Specialist for Melrose Public Schools.
I'm Margaret Adams. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and I'm glad to be here with everybody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Mahoney. I am the Social Emotional Learning Teacher at Lincoln School.
Hello, Melrose. I am Abby DeMagistris. I'm a third grade teacher at the Lincoln School, and I'm so excited to be here with you tonight.
And I am so happy to have the three of you here with me. And so we love emotional check-ins. The people that are on the screen, this is like, we're probably the biggest fans in the district of emotional check-ins and of creating them. And so this is something that if you are supporting your child at home right now with online learning or remote learning, you have likely seen your child's teacher checking in with them in some way, shape, or form. We love fun ones, and this is our latest fun one created by Monica Knack, who is a special education teacher at the Hoover School, and she lives in Beverly Farms. And so she has this kind of Beverly Farms scarecrow check-in that she's been creating as they've been putting up new ones all over, I believe she said it's West Street in Beverly Farms. So I want you to take a moment and just think about which scarecrow is best representing you tonight. And when you feel like you know which scarecrow is best representing you tonight, I want you to either put it in the chat to share it with whoever else is watching, turn and share it to someone else in your home, or just say it to yourself and give yourself like a good little chuckle about which scarecrow you are. All right, and so feel free, team, you can also check in and let others know how you are feeling. Awesome. I would definitely say, because I'm, the one talking, so, and I know everyone knows I have no issue with talking. I'm probably like a number one. I'm smiling and I'm really happy to be here, excited to do this. But it is 7 o'clock at night and it's like nearing bedtime. So I'm kind of like slumping down and, but I will stay alert and we can get through this. We're going to have a good night together. So we have norms. We in Melrose really wholeheartedly believe in norms for meetings. And I had mentioned this last time and I hadn't necessarily received feedback. So I just want to put that out there again, that you are always welcome to give feedback on the norms that I'm proposing to the group. This isn't an interactive, aside from the chat kind of webinar or session. So you're welcome to email or you're welcome to make recommendations in the chat if you feel like something's missing or should be rephrased. We are very open to making sure that these work for the community as a whole. My number one norm always is take care of you. You need to take care of you. Again, this will be recorded, this will be sent out. So whether you're watching it live or you're watching it recorded, taking care of you is number one. We want to acknowledge to ourselves and to others that any type of growth takes time. We can't change overnight. And tonight we're talking about challenging conversations. So we could potentially be talking about challenging behavior. And that especially we want to acknowledge takes time. We are always showing grace and empathy for all. We will make mistakes up here. We will do our best to overcome them. And we offer the same to you as well. We also want to kind of put out there that we're accepting that questions may go unanswered. You gave me such a broad spectrum of questions, which was awesome in reflection for how I would prepare for tonight. I don't know if I'm going to be able to address all of them personally and individually. However, I think that we will be able to give you some tools to navigate any of the conversation topics that you shared. And then we also really want you to just be open to new ideas. This may be giving you a different way of thinking, and that's okay. Instead of feeling that resistance when you first hear something, just kind of be self-aware and pause and just say, okay, I'm gonna try to wrap my head around that. So for tonight's agenda, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of social emotional learning. And it's not going to do social emotional learning justice, but it'll be a very quick overview, at least in the context of tonight. Then we're going to talk about some components of challenging conversations, and not necessarily in an order, but just different parts in how to kind of navigate a conversation with your child. This also comes in handy with your partners at home too. I use it often with mine. And then family circles are another topic that we're going to end with. And full disclosure, I'm a lover of circles, and it's really the topic I'm hoping to kind of enter with you next time, and hoping that Margaret and Abby and Kate will also be part of the facilitation process next time, and maybe a few others that I can kind of rope into this. And at the end, this is just my moment to say, if you feel like at the end, like you're sitting back and saying, wow, she did not address anything that I really needed her to address. It is so hard in my house. This is feeling way more challenging than the suggestions she gave. That's okay. We're going to highlight the resources that you have and where you can go next. Okay. So this isn't meant to be like a therapeutic training. And so if you feel like that's the level that you need for your home, we will highlight who to talk to per school. And then at the end, we'll open it up for question and answer time, although you are welcome to ask questions at any time in the chat, and my team will do the best they can to answer. And then we do have an opportunity for feedback at the end. We'll make sure it's put in the chat, and then it will also be in the slides. So just to kind of think about the context of tonight's challenging conversations that we're talking about, we want to think about it in terms of learning. As a social emotional learning coach and formerly teacher, my frame is always, how can I help students build skills and teachers build skills so that we have students fully accessing their classroom, or accessing their classroom as much as they can or they're able to. And so that's really where we want the frame to come from tonight. And so just wanted to preface with that. And so when we're talking about social emotional learning, and you might hear me say SEL, we are talking about what this picture is that you see on the screen. It looks a little complicated, and this is directly from the Center for Academics and Social Emotional Learning. In their definition of social emotional learning is that it's a process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. Sounds amazing. And it is truly the most wonderful job. So I love being able to do this work every day. And so how does this relate tonight? Because we're in schools, we really focus on these 5 more than anything, and then we do focus on those outer rings. But for tonight, our main purpose is to really think for a moment about this self-awareness and self-management piece. And so self-awareness, whether we're thinking about adults or children, is knowing how you're feeling, being able to accurately identify how you're feeling, and knowing what your body needs to handle that emotion. Right. And then self-management is not just knowing, but acting on it and actually managing it in an age-appropriate way. Okay. And so you can see already why that's so relevant to a challenging conversation. And I could definitely sit here and talk about the other three and how those are very much part of a challenging conversation. Having empathy for the other person and building a relationship, talking about solutions and figuring out the next one or the best one that suits the both of you. But the two I really wanted to highlight for the purpose of tonight is the self-awareness and self-management. So just to frame that context of what a challenging conversation is, it could be you delivering unpleasant news, or maybe your child delivering unpleasant news. It could be all about tackling a behavior that might need to be changed. Excuse me, it could be talking about a necessary but kind of uncomfortable subject. And if you submitted questions, you might be kind of categorizing yourself already. And then it might be in response to something that is happening in the moment, or maybe just has it happened, that could have caused you or your child to be stressed. And so when we're thinking about challenging conversations, it's really this time where any kind of person that's participating in the conversation is in this heightened state, okay? And so that's where we're defining challenging conversation. So now I want you to have this mindful moment. Not really typically the way we would do a mindful moment, but it's just a moment of reflection. And I want you to think about a challenging conversation you have had or you need to have with your child. And I'd like you to try to keep it within that context of school or learning. But if you don't have that, it's okay to think of something else that might be more pressing. And if you're anything like me and you want to sketch down a couple notes so you can kind of just solidify and put it on paper so you can look at it and kind of manipulate it and work that tonight, I would suggest that. Or you could turn to someone that you might be at home with and share that with them. And that'll give you an opportunity to discuss throughout the time. If you feel comfortable, you are also welcome to share that challenging kind of conversation topic. You don't necessarily have to give tons of details in the chat. I think it's helpful sometimes if we can connect with others, just to see that we're not alone and that we all have kind of similar challenges or similar hurdles to handle with our children. So feel free to use the chat at any time for that purpose. So these components of a challenging conversation that we're going to talk about tonight is thinking about what your child's specific concern is, and really taking the time to clarify if needed. So a lot of the things we're talking about tonight are things that I learned as a teacher. I'm still figuring out being a parent. I was joking earlier and I was telling my husband and giving him the run through of the script. And he's like, when are you going to take your own advice? And I started laughing. So I'm like, oh, I do need to get better at taking my own advice, because being a parent or being a grown up in a home with children is hard, right? There are hard days and there are good days. And so you want to really make sure when you're having this moment or this conversation with your child that you can clearly articulate what their concern is. And we'll talk more about that. You also want to reflect on your role or your impact on the conversation, right? So not just what is being said, but what is happening. And we'll talk more about that as well. And then there's this planning piece. And sometimes you can't necessarily plan if you're having this challenging conversation in the moment. However, you can plan when you are going to have that follow-up conversation. And we'll talk about that as well. So thinking more about that clarity that we're looking for with our child, here's some guiding questions that you can use to frame your thinking. So just asking your child or reflecting, like, what is happening to make this feel challenging? And can my child even tell me what's upsetting them right now? And then more importantly, can I articulate what they're trying to say? What is their challenge? And so when you're thinking of what is my child upset about, those are some questions that you might use to ask. And what you're trying to do is really gain all of the information that you need about the situation. I'm forever famous for this in my house, and walking into a situation and assuming that I have all the facts. And then I start digging a little bit and asking clarifying questions. And I'm like, well, that is not at all what I expected the problem to be. It just happened about an hour ago with my own children. Which kind of was a good reminder of this one. And I think the biggest one we want to make sure that we enter with is like, are you okay? And I know that that's a struggle for me as a parent, is that sometimes we walk in and you're immediately like, well, what just happened? And you kind of start in that you're already in this heightened state and kind of entering and just saying like, are you okay? Is like anyone hurt? You know, what happened? And when you say what happened, genuinely listening. And then if you really don't have a full picture of what happened, just asking your child or children, can you tell me more about what happened? I need more details so I'm clear about what happened. And when we're in these moments, we want to really be sure that we're remembering to validate our student and our children, their feelings. And so some examples of how you can do that are on the screen now, by saying like, you know, I can see how not being called on would make you feel sad. And I have felt that way too. So it gives your child an opportunity to say, well, oh, wow, my parent has felt like that, same as I have. And then that gives you an opportunity to kind of talk about it and problem solve. And we really want to take that time to model empathy as well. And so kind of giving them that moment to think about their classmates. So this is one that I know I've personally seen. I've been going into a lot of different classrooms in K-5 in the district. And there's always a student that's kind of unmuting and being like, blah, on the screen. Or just like kind of forgetting to mute and making noises in the background. And so just asking them like, well, how do you think your classmates feel when you're unmuting and making noises? And just not really being kind of aggressive or authoritative, but just genuinely inquiring, like, have you even thought about that? And then this question that we had talked about before, really thinking about, do you understand their concern? And just asking these kind of questions of, can you tell me more about what happened? And I'm hearing you say, is this correct? So you really want to make sure that you're completely hearing them. This is where that like active listening really comes in. And I love the last one of just saying like, I think I understand. Is there anything else you want me to know? Because sometimes they do have more. And just kind of reminding yourself that it's not quite time for you to start sharing your concerns if you're still digging and trying to understand theirs, right? When people, it's important to remember, and I know that this makes me feel regulated and validated, is when someone's genuinely trying to understand how I feel and they're not rushing to give their opinion, it makes me feel calmer. It makes me feel more regulated. It helps me feel like I'm really in control of the situation. And so one of my most favorite phrases that I've ever heard is if the behavior has you feeling furious, don't get mad, just get curious. And I think it's perfect for this situation. And I love this kind of just example of like, I can see that you've walked away from the computer. I know it's writing time right now. Tell me what you're thinking. Instead of kind of saying like, you have writing on the computer, like get back over there. Why are you walking away? Just kind of pausing in the moment and taking a breath and asking them what they need. So another thing to do when we are trying to clarify what our child is feeling and maybe why they're feeling that way is to help them identify what they're feeling and why. We do this a lot as teachers in the classroom, and so this is a strategy that we really want to send home and make sure that you have the tools or that you have the understanding of why we do this. We have this phrase in the emotional intelligence world or social emotional world that it's, if you can name it, you can tame it. And so really taking that opportunity, give your child tools to help them name emotions accurately so that they can tame their emotions accurately. Because different emotions, they might have different strategies for how to manage them. And that's something that I'm forever being reminded about as an SEL specialist for the district. And I love this saying. I'm sure others in the audience have heard this, but I just think it's so relevant to this topic. And it's just, never in the history of calm down has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down. And it's just so accurate. And I say, like, have you ever said this? And I will be the first to raise my hand because I definitely have been in the position of saying that. It's hard not to, especially when you're not in control of your feelings in that moment. And so when we're thinking about reflecting on our goal in a challenging conversation, that was that middle component. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to happen as a second step. It might happen first, it might happen third. It's just a component of a conversation. you really want to think about your self-awareness. So if you remember, I said self-awareness is knowing what you're feeling and accurately naming it, and then knowing what you need to do to handle that emotion. So if you know that, like, walking into a situation where, if your child walked away from learning while their teacher's on the computer, and you know that really gets under your skin and upsets you, you want to think before you kind of tackle that. And I know it's much easier said than done, but you want to think, like, what do I need to do so I can just go have a constructive conversation with them rather than yelling? And that did come up several times in questions that people offered. So I know that that's something that is on our minds. So you also want to think about what is my self-management or how does my self-management play into this challenging conversation with my child? And so the first thing you want to ask yourself, or I'm asking you right now to think about, you have that conversation that you wrote down beside you, or you turned and talked to your partner about, how are you? And kind of giving yourself a moment to ask yourself, like, how am I right now? Is it the right time for me? Do I have a strategy to help me stay calm? And should this conversation wait is like one of the most important questions you can ask yourself when you're having that moment of reacting to something your child's done. It's the one that I know my partner and I are constantly kind of checking in with each other about is, do you think this should wait? And like, they'll also say, do you think it should wait? And because sometimes, you do enter and you're saying things, a lot more heightened than you really want to. And this is one of my favorite strategies, is just making sure that you're really clear on what you're trying to say before you say it to your child. And so that's where this waiting piece can come in. And I joke and say it on the right, but it's really true. Like, practice it in front of a mirror, say your concerns to your partner, write it down, or just say it to yourself, right? It's okay to just say it to yourself. I do that all the time. I'm like the biggest external processor. But just taking that time to make sure that you're clear, because if you're confused about what your message is, your child will be confused while they're receiving it. And then this is another strategy, again, with kind of thinking about your role in a situation or in a challenging conversation with your child, is when they go high, you want to go low. And what I mean by that is when they're screaming, you want to stay calm and you want to keep your voice low. And I even mean that with like your body physically. Like, as adults with elementary age children, we are probably taller than them. So we are probably much bigger than them. And so when they're upset and yelling, it's natural for us to be in this authoritative stance. And so we want to kind of think about that and how we can become less threatening so that they feel like we're someone that they can problem solve with, and that wants to empathize with them. And so I also have to caution too that it's not just lowering your voice in your body, but it's also lowering the amount of words you're saying. And again, that's where that clarity of like your message comes in, is what are you trying to say? Because again, if you're not clear, they won't be clear either. And this is just this kind of final reminder of, you cannot control them. You can influence them, right? So this is really where that high and low comes in, is that like, if you're low, that is going to influence them. Maybe not right away, but in a couple minutes, in a little while, it'll influence them to maybe co-regulate with you. Co-regulation is a very powerful thing. It is like one of the most powerful strategies for me with my own son. When I'm high, I can guarantee he's going to stay high. And when I go low, he might be high at first, but eventually, if I'm consistent and I really genuinely feel that way, he will come down and co-regulate with me. And so this final component, or this other component, is planning for conversations with your child. And again, you might be thinking, okay, I really need to talk about how my child is not completing their asynchronous work. This is becoming a real sticking point in my house. We need to talk about this. And so you might plan to have this conversation with your child, right? And so when you're planning, you want to think about when to have the conversation and where to have the conversation, and also what else might be involved in this conversation. One of the most important ones for me, though, is really the when. There's nothing worse than kind of hearing that a conversation was tried to happen at like 8 in the morning. That is not the right time to really have a conversation that involves a lot of talking or a lot of depth. Where you want your child to kind of be this active participant. Because 8 in the morning, I don't know about anyone else, but that is not a calm time in my house. It is like a very hectic, very runaround time because everybody is starting their work or school day. So think about, what is a time? Maybe it's right after school. Maybe it's during dinner time. Maybe it's the weekend when everybody really is in their most relaxed state. And also just thinking about what feels neutral to you and your child. So one of the things we want to think about is that maybe their room is neutral, maybe it's not. Maybe their bedroom is neutral. Maybe the dining room table is neutral, maybe it's not. But trying to find a space where they don't feel threatened. And even more than that, because in their home, they likely feel calm, right? It's their home. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but likely their home feels comfortable. And then just thinking about, in your home, is there a place where you can kind of come into that level place with them? So we were talking before about how these are elementary age children. We are often taller or bigger than them. So again, standing over them while they're sitting feels very punitive. It feels very authoritative. And that's what we're trying to not do. So, and in the picture, we have this dining room table. Maybe you could be sitting together, or we have the couch. Again, maybe you could be sitting together. If you're able to get on the floor with your child, if they're little and that's their preference, that's another option. These are all strategies that we use as classroom teachers or as specialists in school. Talking about the time, we think about times of day that students are able to have these conversations. And we also think about this, this kind of space between us, or where our body is in position. Another one I really want to talk about for when you're planning to have conversations with your child is what we call a cognitive distraction. Cognitive distractions can be so many different things for every child. Everyone really is going to have something that's a little bit different. One of my favorite things as a social emotional learning teacher, when I used to do that at the Lincoln School, and it still is as I'm kind of this traveling salesman in Melrose, is a puzzle. You really can't go wrong with like putting a puzzle on the table, nothing too hard. But those like 24 or 48 piece puzzles are perfect for this. And it just gives everybody, yourself included, something to focus on. And it's not a lot of times I'll get a question like, well, isn't that a reward? And it's not, because if you think about, you always want to ask yourself, like, what is my intention for this time? My intention is to have a challenging conversation. I want to try to problem solve this with my child. And so if you're always reminding yourself of that, the puzzle isn't, in theory, going to be the reward. But the one thing you do want to think about is this the only time that your child's getting that one-on-one attention from you? Because then that could start to be a more learned behavior. So again, puzzles, one of my favorites, but again, you know your child best. So you want to be really thoughtful about what you might be pulling in to kind of busy their hands or give them something else to focus on. One of the things that teachers often ask me during this time is that they say, well, the child won't be looking at me, and how am I going to know that they're listening? And so I always try to say, like, well, eye contact doesn't necessarily equate to listening, right? And so you know they're listening maybe by the way they're engaging with you, whether it's verbally or non-verbally, or you just might not know until after. Like, you really just might need to hope that they're listening, and usually they are. And so one of the sentence frames that you might use in this situation is, let's work on this puzzle while we talk about, and just say it. Mm-hmm. And there is this hesitation on there, or this kind of, we'll say, pause or warning, is just be mindful of what you offer, because you don't want it to be something that, so for example, like if a child is, like my son throws when he gets upset. So puzzles are safe because I'm not going to get hurt if the puzzle starts flying, right? And so you want to be really mindful of things that you're choosing just based on what you know about your child. And so another piece of challenging conversations that can be very helpful, and again, you just want to know your child if previewing can cause anxiety, but a lot of times with children or students, previewing can be helpful. Like, we are going to have this conversation about, and you just state it, and I just want to let you know so you have time to think about it. You know, I want to hear what your concern is, and so I want you to have time to be able to tell me what your concern is. And so just giving them that opportunity to process before sitting down with them, because nobody really likes to be blindsided. And then I always remind myself, why should I feel prepared and they don't, right? And so it really kind of equals that playing field for both of you. And so one of the things that we've kind of been alluding to is if you're preparing for a conversation that your child doesn't necessarily know is coming, and lots of different topics that came up in the feedback or in the RSVP form did fall in this category. So this is your moment to say, kind of perk your ears up and to kind of really listen in. And so you still want to think about your role. And you still want to think about that plan, right? So, you know, how are your emotions going to be? One of the topics that got brought up, and again, we're not going to dive deeply into this, but death came up quite a few times and how to talk to your child about that. And so you might want to think about, is this something that I need to practice talking about ahead of time with my partner, with a friend, with someone else, maybe just by myself, because this could trigger big emotions in me. And then also giving yourself permission to work through those big emotions with your child. It's okay to let them see you feel them, because then you're modeling to them that big emotions are okay to have, and then we're modeling how we get through them. Again, you also want to think about that plan. So if it is a topic as big as the one we were just kind of mentioned, when is the best time to have those conversations? Probably not at 8 in the morning, likely not right after school, but you will find or think about the best time, kind of knowing your child and knowing your family. And then once you've thought about it, you want to clearly state your message. So it's the same thing as if you're doing it in response. And then once you've clearly stated your message, you just want to wait. It's okay to give them wait time. This is one of the hardest things that we work on as teachers, is just pausing and giving wait time. And so one of the strategies I always did for myself as a classroom teacher is counting to 10. And you might in this situation want to count to 20 because you probably will count fast. And so just really pausing and giving them time, giving them an opportunity to process what you've just said to them in this very clear way, and then asking them, do you have any questions? Because in this moment, adults, in my experience, they typically start to just spiral and just start saying and giving more information. And so in this moment, you want to catch yourself and say, no, I gave the message that I really wanted to give. I gave the message that I practiced. I asked if they had questions. And if they don't have questions, it's okay. Right? And so just giving yourself that permission that in that moment, they really might not have any questions. And so one of the strategies in that kind of a difficult conversation moment, and again, if you're having any questions that you'd like us to pause, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm very happy to pause and stop at any time if there's something you want to talk deeper about. But after you've given them that opportunity to pause and ask questions, and maybe they haven't said anything or asked, we as teachers use nonverbal ways of communicating all the time. One of my favorites as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, then as a social emotional learning teacher, and now as a specialist, is a journal, right? It is like one of my favorite methods is this two-way journal. And it is so shocking how children sometimes will not open up to you verbally, but when you start writing back and forth to them, they will pour their hearts out. And so that is something that I can see, you know, Miss Mahoney and Miss D smiling about, because I know that they have had that experience as well. And I know that that's something that I feel like is something you might want to also put in place in home. Another success that I've had in school with children is giving them places to put their worries or to put their concerns. That is a worry monster. It's like mouth zips open and you can stuff them inside. It's obviously for a little bit younger. But another thing you could do with your child is create a box, like a concern box or suggestion box or a worry box or whatever it is. It could be like a good family project. And it's just, again, a place for them to put their concerns or put their questions or put their kind of follow-up discussion. The other visual that you see on there, and again, when you get the slides, we'll make sure that they are linked. So if you want to have some other kind of, you want a link to this visual, is what I call a comfort scale. A comfort scale is often something I would keep on the table and still keep on the table when you're having challenging conversations. So the child can physically show you or visually show you how comfortable they are throughout the conversation. With students, I used to keep a clothespin on there and I would check in with them at the start and see how comfortable are you. And I would just give them that invitation to kind of communicate throughout as they get more uncomfortable to kind of move it, or as they get more comfortable to move it. And so that I could visually see like, oh, I better kind of back off a little bit. I can see they're getting like into that kind of orangey red, or, oh, they're doing pretty good. So I can keep pushing a little bit. And that does take some time to kind of develop that, but it's a success that I often had with children. One of the things that you want to really continuously be also mindful of is it a conversation or is it a lecture? And so when we think about this definition of what a conversation is, it's really a two-way communication structure that's happening between two or more people, where all parties are having the opportunity, not necessarily sharing, but they're having this opportunity to share their thoughts, to share their ideas, to ask questions, to listen, and to process. And so if you're in this state of you're just talking and they're not responding, so you're talking some more and they're not responding, so you're talking some more, you want to be mindful of that, because then it can so easily shift into this place of what we would call a lecture. And so just be mindful of talking too much or being too repetitive. I know that was one I experienced a lot as a child, as my parents would just continuously say the same thing over and over, and I'm like, I heard you the first time. And so I just needed a minute to think about it. And so try to avoid giving warnings as well. A warning, not that there isn't a time for setting limits, but if you're truly trying to have a conversation, it can shut them down. So just knowing that there's a time and place for that as well. Usually we say in school that we set limits when safety is a concern, right? So if you are trying to leave the building, I'm going to say, no, if you leave the building, like that is not a good choice. Like, you know what I mean? So that's where you might like set a limit. Like, we do not leave the building when we're at school. Same as like at home. Like, we do not leave the house without a grown-up. And you just want to make sure that you are listening. And this is just that reminder of it's okay to not have a resolution in a conversation. And so I think of, as an adult, say you do want to have this tricky conversation and you do take this time to plan it and to think about it and like, oh, it's going to be amazing. We're going to sit down on Saturday morning and we're going to go for a walk and we're going to sit on my child's favorite park bench and I'm going to give them a donut and we're going to sit down. We're going to have this most beautiful conversation. And it just might not plan out that. It just might not be exactly what you pictured. So it's okay to walk away and have to do it again. Like, it's okay to walk away and have it not be resolved the way you were hoping for. I don't have to probably say that to anyone else out there, that is like parenting in a nutshell, or being a home grown up in a nutshell, is that nothing ever goes as planned. So. And then just to really kind of remind you that as uncomfortable as you or your child may be, just to remember to check in on them. So say that they didn't say anything, you gave them this opportunity to ask questions and they didn't ask questions. You gave them this nonverbal opportunity to communicate you and they didn't do it right away. And this is making you very uncomfortable, and you can sense that it's probably making them really uncomfortable. But just know that it's okay. They might need more time, and just kind of be willing to accept that they may come to you when you're not expecting it. So same as you went to them to bring it up when they weren't expecting it, they might also come to you when you're not expecting it. So before we get into family circles, I want to give wait time and just pause for, we'll say 2 minutes to just see if anyone wants to ask questions about anything that we have talked about so far. Okay. I'm going to give 2 minutes, and feel free to put questions in the chat if you have any. And Ms. D, Ms. Mahoney, or Dr. Adams, you are also welcome to ask clarifying questions in the chat. Wait time is hard. And if you're not in a place where you want to ask a question, it's also a good moment to pause and reflect about the conversation that you noted in the beginning. And so just kind of note and see if there's anything you want to write down in reflection of that conversation. So in the beginning, I prompted you to think about a conversation that you recently had or that you would like to have with your child. And so just give yourself a moment to pause and think about if there's anything that you want to reflect on. All right. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I am going to talk to you about one of my favorite things to do in schools. I absolutely love everything related to community circles in restorative practices in schools. And one of the things that we shared, or one of the resources we shared with families for remote instruction in the spring is community circles, or bringing family circles into your home. And so when I'm talking about anything challenge with the word challenging in it, you cannot do it without talking about circles. In schools, this is always the first kind of question that I would have for teachers. If they say, I'm having this challenging moment with my child or with my student, the first thing I would say is, are you doing community circles consistently? Because if you say yes, there's this whole other format or whole other practice that I can use with the child. And that's a restorative conversation. However, if students aren't necessarily familiar with the format, it's not that we can't do it, it just takes a little more pre-teaching. And so my suggestion to you is to really listen right now, because this will provide that framework. So for when you have challenging conversations, and again, this would be more of like our follow-up discussion, how to use restorative practices to help you in these challenging moments. In the slideshow, there will be some resources linked at the bottom. Those blue words, those will be links. There's some mindfulness scripts, and then there's some other circle visuals that we use in school that you might find helpful. And so one of the things we want to think about is, what even is a family circle? And so to understand that, I'm going to put it in the context of what is a community circle in school. And so we use community circles in school as a way of giving voice, or giving the opportunity for voice, to all children or all members of the community. And so when we are thinking about circles, I advise teachers to not necessarily think of themselves as a teacher anymore, but to think of themselves as a participant. And if they are choosing to be the facilitator, they can be the facilitator. Over time, we've had so many success stories of students being facilitators in circles, and that's something that a practice that I hope to build more and more through the years in Melrose. And so we say it like that because we want students to feel like, again, teachers are not in this like authoritative place and students are down here. We want to be in this physically and emotionally kind of level and equal place with our students. Circles are bound by norms and by guidelines. So those are things that we really honor in circles, such as like we have talking pieces, and we speak when we have the talking piece, we listen with our heart. And so we highly recommend trying to implement circles at home. And if you click on the visual, when the slides come to you, it will be a link to that visual, just bigger, so you can see kind of this one-page overview for you to try to do this. The first circle that's on there, though, we'll break apart some of them, is really thinking about when you want to have a family circle. I personally think that dinner time is probably the best time, at least in my home. It might not be the case in everyone's home. We've also had success in my house. It's Sunday morning. It seems to be the time of the week when everyone is like most relaxed. And our dinner table is starting to be our favorite place. And I actually just talked to my husband into having or buying a circular table a few weeks ago, which was really exciting for me in terms of family circles. Because now we don't have to have circles around a rectangle. We can actually have them around a circle. So you want to think about the time, think about the location, and just really think about what would be best for you and your family. You want to pick a talking piece, and as silly as it is, a talking piece is a signal to anyone that's in the circle that whoever's holding it is the one that's talking. And in circles, we really honor that only one person is speaking at a time. It is no shock to anyone on here right now that I love to talk. And so that talking piece is like this very tangible reminder for myself. And it's like when I see it going around, it's like, just do not talk, right? And it's a really powerful thing. For little students, I highly recommend stuffed animals. That is like one of the best things that you can use. And honestly, even older students, upper elementary students, they sometimes really love stuffed animals. It gives them something to kind of hug and squish, especially the further, the deeper your conversation or the deeper your circle gets. When you're starting to talk about things that stir up a lot of emotions, stuffed animals can help be very regulating to your children. That little thing on there that's like, it's like this mesh bag with marbles in it. That is another one of my favorite talking pieces with students because it gives them something to fidget with while they're talking or something to look at, so they'll talk. But it's not too distracting that they won't give it up or that they'll forget what they were trying to say. So it's really, really important. And yes, in the chat, I see that someone has mentioned that they let their child or let their family or nieces choose the talking piece. And yes, that's exactly something I would highly, highly recommend is let your children choose the talking piece. You might choose it at first to kind of get it going, but that's a really awesome thing to get their buy-in or their ownership of the circle is to let them choose. One of the other things we do with students is we each bring one, right? So we each bring something or each pick something and put it in the middle. And then you have this opportunity when it's your turn to kind of switch it out, and you might try out someone else's talking piece or stick with yours. And I would highly suggest that at home as well. And so when you are thinking about having circles, the next suggestion is to just have your first circle. And this is one of the things for the next family night, which will likely be in probably 3 weeks. I don't know that definitely, but that's what I'm thinking. It'll be in 3 weeks. This is one of the things that we hope to address with you that evening is creating family norms together. So if you want to try this ahead of time and then maybe you can refine it or fine tune it that night, that's fine. But one of the things that you would want to do is create family norms together. And here's just an example of some norms that you could start with or you could get ideas from. But one of the things you see is that one person is speaking at a time. Everyone has that, we'll say, opportunity to speak. I want to be really careful in saying everyone has to speak, because you always have that permission to pass your talking piece and just listen. Another example of a family norm is that everyone is listening to each other, in that you are choosing times that work for everybody. And I really love the bottom one, and this is one we're trying to use in my house, is just remembering that we love you, right? So when we're having tricky conversations, just remembering like that love is there between us. Once you start having family circles, and again, this is something that we can talk about next time, and I mean, I could do 10 nights on family circles, but brainstorming topics with your child. So having this jar, this kind of place to put ideas. So as your child, is going through their week, or you're going through your week, and you say, oh, that would be a good circle topic, and you have this little jar that's kind of this place to put ideas. And this is something I used to do with lots of different groups of kids at school. We used to do the same thing when they would think of an idea. They had a specific place that their group put their ideas. And then when it came time for their circle time of the week, we would pull from the jar, and that would kind of frame our circle. And so I would suggest that's another really good one. It's important to note that frequency of circles, or doing them on a routine basis. In school, we do it every day, but in your home, I would say once a week would be awesome. And frequency is really essential for being able to have those challenging conversations. You want them to understand this structure. So if you pose a challenging question, they understand that it's a safe space or a brave space for them to have a voice and to feel heard. And so this is kind of our final moment to pause and to really go back to thinking about your conversation that you want to have or you did have at the start of your session, and then we revisited it just about 10-15 minutes ago. And I want you to think about what a next step is for you and what feels manageable from tonight. And you are welcome to put it in the chat if that's something that you feel comfortable doing, or I encourage you to turn to your partner or talk to yourself in the mirror. Just kind of keep it to yourself. I'm a big sketch noter. All right. And so I will give a minute. I know that we haven't had many questions, and that's okay. If you are watching this at a later time, so right now this is live, but if you are watching this at a later time and you have a question that comes up, you're welcome to email myself or Margaret. Our emails are attached right to the slideshow. Margaret loves getting emails. So you are welcome to ask now, or welcome to wait.
Jess, we have a question in the chat. Michelle asks, can you share some examples of good starter family circle topics?
Be super simple and fun. Like some of our favorite ones, and I might even refer to Miss D and Miss Mahoney to share one of their favorite ones. But I know Margaret's is like, what's your favorite superhero? If you could be any superhero, what would you pick? And it's really in the beginning, Michelle, it's a great question. In the beginning, it's really about building connections. Even though they're your child and it's your family, I guarantee you'll learn something about them that you didn't know that you needed to know, right? And so it might be something as simple as like, what's your favorite superhero and why? And it could also be something as simple as like, what's your favorite dessert? And like, why would you call that your favorite dessert? Miss D or Miss Mahoney, do you have a favorite? Because you are both circle lovers as well.
I would say one of my go-to for the beginning of the year especially is if you could wake up as any animal, what animal would you be? And I think it's something that's it's a low-hanging fruit because you think you're talking about animals, but it kind of digs deep into like those characteristics of the kids in front of you, and they don't actually notice that they're sharing about themselves through the animal that they're choosing. That's a good one.
That's a good one, Misty. One that I've been doing this week that has been really fun and is always interesting to hear the different answers. It's an oldie but goodie. What 3 items would you bring to a deserted island with you? And it's very interesting to see who goes kind of more the practical route and who goes more taking it as a vacation route, and who's able to kind of find the red tape, as in they'd bring a boat so they can just travel home.
And so those are all awesome examples. And I hope that helped, Michelle, that it's really about giving opportunity to connect with your family. And you're really introducing the process of having this talking piece, passing it around the table, letting everyone have an opportunity to share and to give their perspective and their voice, and kind of honoring that just that opportunity to speak and be heard, and not cut off and not have anyone really dominate the conversation. Because I think as adults, and this is something that I often had to remind myself as a teacher when I started doing circles, is that teachers and adults do tend to dominate conversation with children. And so circles are kind of that like reminder that like, I need to back up and it's not all about me, it's about all of us. Again, please feel free to share. Put questions in the chat if you have any others. All right. Was there another question? Did I miss anything? No? Okay, just making sure. All right, so the resources that I just want to highlight, and again, this will be in the slideshow in sorry about that. The slideshow, this final slide, these are the resources that are by school. So you will, just depending on the school that you go to, these are the people that, if I talk tonight and you're like, this is bigger than what she's talking about. This is a chronic thing in my house. I don't know how to handle this. If you're feeling kind of that overwhelmed like sensation right now, like I can't do this alone, you don't have to. There's a lot of people in this district that really want to help you. So all of your administrators, at least at the elementary level, are listed right on that screen right now, and your social workers in all the buildings. And some of the buildings also have school psychologists, and your administrators would be able to also help you with that if that's the route that your concern needs to go. Those yellow names down the bottom are also linked directly to mine and Margaret's email. And so Kate or Abby, do you mind putting the link to the slideshow in the chat? And so you're welcome to kind of pick that link up right now. It should be open to the public as we speak. So if that's something that you personally need right away, it is there for you. And then this final slide is just kind of this reminder to thank you to all of you for being here, and for, feeling energized and excited about this topic. And again, if you're watching this later, please still give us feedback. This blue link right there, and I'm sure that Ms. D or Ms. Mahoney will also put that in the chat, so you have the direct link to the feedback form. And please give it to us so we know what you need and what you would like next. So thank you, everyone.